Part 73. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 721. Chapter 721 Wang Tianyu's hidden injury 2. Even if he wants to help Tianyuman, he is powerless. After all, this is a place blessed by God. Other places may be better. This is just a technical job. There is no need for him to offend his good friend over a woman he just met. Don't think too badly of Tianyu. He is just too paranoid about Tangyuj, and you are Tangyuj's wife if you are not unlucky. Who else is? Tianyuman was a little sulky and didn't want to reply to Kenny, but Kenny didn't care and continued talking. If you get to know him well, you will find that he is just a poor person. Tianyuman sneered. Pitiful. How pitiful is he? If you are rich and powerful, you can seize a woman and lock her up at home. Don't be too arrogant. Tianyuman puffed out her cheeks angrily and went back to the room. She was very depressed because her efforts to find Kenny to save her failed. She also understood that Kenny had no obligation to save her, and he had the right to reject her. She understood this very well, and there was nothing she could do except get angry and say a few unpleasant words. In the past few days, Tianyuman has had an extremely peaceful week. Her belly has also begun to inflate, and it is obviously a little bigger every day than yesterday. Entering the 4th month of pregnancy, she has twins again, and the little baby in her belly is growing every day. The reason why this week is described as peaceful is because the 3 male gods in the villa are very quiet. They either get together to drink, play, or swim for entertainment, and their main purpose is to do their own thing, and all of a sudden they disappear. Tianyuman can often see one of them sitting alone in the living room, or 2 people sitting and chatting. When Tianyuman saw Wang Tianyu, she hid like the plague. If it was Dongfang Xiang and Kenny, she would still happily chat with them. Of the 3 men, only Wang Tianyu had a stern face every time he saw her, and did not give her a good look. The one with the best personality among the 3 is Kenny, who is more humorous and humorous. Although Dongfang Xiang didn't pay much attention to her at first, after getting to know her, he found out that he is a nice man who can also talk and laugh. Take some medicine regularly. Later I found out that he was sick and came here to recuperate. Tianyuman spent this week relatively calmly. As Kenny said, Wang Tianyu didn't want to hurt herself again. Except for the last time when he took the doctor to abort her, he never used any force when they met after that. Zhang's face is a bit stinky and he doesn't give himself a smile. Facing Wang Tianyu's stinky face, it would be better to lie on the bed. Tianyuman actually wants to leave here, even though this period of time has been very warm. I have been here for almost a month and have already entered the school season in September. As a people's teacher, if you don't report on time, maybe the school plans to expel you. It's hard to get past the probationary period of work. And her lovely group of students. After living in the villa for a month, she was going crazy. She knew every plant and tree in the villa, how many rooms there were, what was in the room, which flowers bloomed and which flowers were picked today. Everything is clear. She was so bored that she was almost driven crazy by the loneliness. The TV is not good either. It is all in French and English. Although it is no obstacle for her, there are no exciting domestic TV dramas. Your Majesty's paw was scratched by glass and is still bleeding. There won't be many updates today. I'll update more when the scabs form tomorrow. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 722. Chapter 722 Wang Tianyu's hidden injury 3. On this day, there was no one in the whole house, not even Dongfang Xiang who was recovering from illness. Tianyuman was too bored lying on the sofa. The servants who took care of Tianyuman also went to take a nap. She was not in the mood for a nap today. Instead, she was in high spirits. She was just too bored. By some strange combination of circumstances, she unknowingly came to the only room in the house that she had never entered before. That was the room that belonged to Wang Tianyue. No one could enter this room except himself. The door is always locked. Qian Yuman was not curious at all before. Today, for some reason, she is particularly curious about the layout of Wang Tianyue's room. If she can discover an ulterior secret or an unspeakable disease, she can use it to blackmail him and let her go. Qian Yuman found a substitute that could unlock the door in the house. She thought that her ability to open the door lock was still very good. Although it was not as good as her sister, she still had no problem opening the door. It happened that no one was wandering around in the house, so she spent about 5 minutes opening the door and then slipped in like a thief. The layout of the room is similar to that of other rooms. There is nothing different about it. If I say it is different, it is just that there are some Wang Tianyue things. Qian Yuman glanced around the room and wondered why Wang Tianyue didn't let anyone in. Qian Yuman was confused for a moment about the weirdo Wang Tianyue's thoughts. Her eyes swept across the bookshelves in Wang Tianyue's room. There were quite a few books in his room, and she could see that these books had been turned over. Qian Yuman saw a slightly older book that was obviously often read by others. This slightly old book turned out to be a fairy tale. I didn't expect Wang Tianyue to be so naive. Qian Yuman was happy in her heart and pulled out the fairy tales. She had already imagined in her mind that next time she sees Wang Tianyue, she can laugh at him as a child who has not grown up yet and is still reading fairy tales at such an old age. After Qian Yuman took out the book, he opened it before opening the book because there was a photo inside, so he directly opened the page with the photo. Qian Yuman glanced at the content of the fairy tale. It was the story of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. She has some impression of this story, because Wang Tianyue's favorite story was the story when he was a child, and he often dressed himself up as Alibaba. Unexpectedly, after so many years, he still liked this story. She also liked Snow White when she was a child, but now she has no feeling for this fairy tale. She reached out and took out the photo from the book, staring at the scene in the photo. The scene in the photo was very familiar to Qian Yuman, because she had seen this photo before, and it was a photo of Wang's family of 3. In the photo, Wang's father has a kind face, Wang Tiankai smiles gently, and Wang Tianyue smiles like a little fool, grinning with big white teeth. The 3 people in the photo look very happy, especially Wang Tianyue's smile. Looking back carefully, after meeting Wang Tianyue again, he rarely had a smile from the bottom of his heart. He often smiled superficially, or it was a hypocritical smile. It's been a long time since I've seen him smile like the one in the photo. I remember when he was a child, he was a very cheerful and trouble-making boy. What has he experienced in the past few years that will change the smile on his face to what it is now? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 723. Chapter 723 Wang Tianyue's Hidden Injury 4. Is it related to brother Wang in the past and Tangyuj now? Did something happen to them in the past few years that she didn't know about? Qian Yuman has always been confused. He has lived in the Wang family for 11 years after he disappeared from the Tang family. Why did he go to the Wang family and name him Wang Tiankai, and why did he completely leave the Wang family and return to the Tang family 11 years later? Why did Wang Tianyue think of him as his enemy? Tangyu's personality also underwent a 160-degree change after returning to the Tang family. It's not just Wang Tianyue whose personality has changed. Even the personality of brother Wang has also changed a lot, and there are no traces of his childhood. She didn't know anything about what happened to the 2 brothers back then. If she tried to ask them, their faces would become ugly. Something must have happened in the year they disappeared to change them. Also, why is Wang Tianyu now the adopted son of the Dongfang family? From now on, he lives in the Dongfang family and calls Dongfang Xiang's father his godfather. Where is Wang's father going? At this moment, Qian Yuman suddenly realized that he had never heard anything about Uncle Wang from their brothers during this time. It doesn't make sense. I remember that when they were young, they all respected Uncle Wang. Uncle Wang was also a loving father and cared deeply about the two brothers. Although he occasionally beats and scolds the two brothers, he is definitely a qualified father. After she met the two brothers again, not only did she not see Uncle Wang, she also did not hear anything about Uncle Wang from them. Looking at Uncle Wang's kind face in the photo, Qian Yuman couldn't help but think about the past carefully. Why did Wang Tianyu put their photos from more than 10 years ago in the fairy tale? Qian Yuman couldn't help but ponder. Putting down the book in her hand, she started looking around the room to see if she could see any photos of Wang Tianyu in recent years, and if there were any photos with Uncle Wang. Finally, Qian Yuman did find a photo album, and almost all of the photos in the album were about Wang Tianyu. There are still a lot of photos from the age just after moving to the recent ones. From the photos, you can also see photos of Dongfang Xiang and Kenny. The three of them have known each other for a long time and seem to have a good relationship. Qian Yuman looked at these photos and discovered something. There was no smile on Wang Tianyu's face in his early years. He always has a stern face, as if the whole world owes him a sum of money, and his eyes look at people as if he is cynical and full of hatred for the world. It wasn't until he was an adult, around the age of 20, that he had a smile on his face, but these smiling photos were false. Even now, he often smiles with a smile on his face, and it is even more unnatural than now. His smile never reaches the bottom of his eyes. Looking through the entire photo album, Qian Yuman had a heavy expression on her face and her mood was a bit depressed, because Qian Yuman found that there were no photos of Uncle Wang in this stack of photos. It seems that he has never appeared in Wang Tianyu's life, and there is not a single photo of Uncle Wang. I remember when we met again, Wang Tianyu said that his uncle was still abroad. Why was there even his godfather and an irrelevant person in the photo that he didn't know, but there was no photo of Uncle Wang? It doesn't make sense. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 724. Chapter 724 Wang Tianyu's Hidden Injury 5. Unless Uncle Wang has not been by Wang Tianyu's side for so many years. Qian Yuman was shocked to know the news. She didn't know why Uncle Wang hadn't been by Wang Tianyu's side for so many years. She had already guessed some reasons why the two brothers had turned against each other, which must have something to do with Uncle Wang. What happened 11 years ago, Qian Yuman muttered to herself as she looked at the photo. Suddenly, a voice sounded at the door. "You caught me." Qian Yuman suddenly raised her head and saw Wang Tianyu standing at the door, wondering when he would come back. She didn't realize that he had come back until he made a sound. Qian Yuman was like a child who was caught doing something wrong. He quickly put the photo album in his hand back on the bookshelf, but the doubts in his heart kept prompting him to ask questions. "You really want to know what happened 11 years ago?" Wang Tianyu looked grim, slowly walked towards Qian Yuman, and pulled out the photo album from the bookshelf. "Will you tell me? You all refused to tell me when I asked before, but now I have guessed a few things. It must be related to Uncle Wang." Qian Yuman was sure that except for Uncle Wang, who had never appeared, she could not think of anyone who could tell me. Is there any reason for brothers who have such a good relationship to turn against each other? Let the innocent Wang Tianyu become what he is now. Wang Tianyu smiled contemptuously, threw the photo album in his hand to the ground, looked at her sharply, and even brought his face close to hers. Qian Yuman naturally took a step back to avoid it. You want to know that much? I'm afraid you don't want to know at all, because it will ruin his image in your mind, and I'm afraid you won't be able to bear it. There's nothing I can't stand. Qian Yuman raised her chest. At this moment, she was eager to know the truth. She was eager to know the truth, what happened between their brothers, what happened 11 years ago. Every time she thought of the painful expression on Tang Yu's face when he mentioned the past, she longed to know. How could she not want to know when she was so close to the truth? Wang Tianyu looked at Qian Yuman's ignorant and stupid look and sneered in his heart, but his voice was cold to the bone. If you want to know so much, then I'll tell you why we turned against each other. Qian Yuman forgot about her nervous breathing and looked at Wang Tianyu with wide eyes, waiting for the truth to come. Because of Tang Yuj, my once beloved brother Wang Tiankai personally killed the father who raised him for 11 years. Wang Tianyu seemed to say this calmly, but his eyes were covered with bloodshot eyes and stared. It was extremely huge, as if the eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. The flat tone, the cold expression, and the hateful eyes all told Qian Yuman how much he hated Tang Yuj. Qian Yuman thought about many possibilities, and was completely confused when she heard the truth about their brother's rebellion. He even forgot to breathe or react in any way, and looked at Wang Tianyu in shock, trying to see traces of joking on his face. Brother Wang killed Uncle Wang? How can it be? Father and son are obviously very good, Uncle Wang is very loving, and Brother Wang is very gentle. How could he believe that Brother Wang, who was 14 years old at that time, would kill Uncle Wang, who had raised him for 11 years? You lied. Qian Yuman's voice was trembling. She really couldn't believe it. Uncle Wang is dead. It was Brother Wang who killed him. He must have lied. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 725. Chapter 725 Wang Tianyu's Hidden Injury 6. Wang Tianyu sneered, with an expression that he knew what he was talking about. I said you won't believe it, you have to know. It's unbelievable, Brother Wang was only 14 years old, how could he kill someone at the age of 14? Although he doesn't have to pay with his life for killing, he will still get a certain punishment. What's wrong with the age of 14? My good big brother was smarter than many adults at the age of 14. He didn't need to do it himself. His head was full of ways to kill my father. This ungrateful guy, what a shame. My father has raised him for so many years, and his wings have grown hard. He hit him with a rake and killed my father. I will never forget this in my life. Qian Yuman took a few steps back, and the image of Tang Yuj as a child, Uncle Wang's face, and the family of 3 happily getting along appeared in her mind. Uncle Wang's death, was it really because of Brother Wang? Why? Why? She didn't believe it, and she didn't believe that Brother Wang would kill Uncle Wang. There must be a reason. How could her brother Wang, who was so kind and considerate, who had taken care of her since childhood, single-handedly contribute to Uncle Wang's death? This is impossible. Impossible. Qian Yuman looked shocked, which made Wang Tianyu sneer. Seeing her brother Wang collapse in her heart, there was nothing more satisfying than this. Tang Yuj, this sanctimonious guy, should expose his ugly appearance as soon as possible. Wang Tianyu left, leaving Qian Yuman in the room. Qian Yuman felt very melancholy next. Things that happened when she was a child kept popping up in her mind. Even when she was sleeping, she felt like a child again. Obviously one second he was chatting with Brother Wang, and the next second he saw Brother Wang holding a dagger and stabbing Uncle Wang to death. Having had this nightmare for several days, Qian Yuman still didn't want to believe it. It was already a week later when Kenny came back to Wang Tianyu's vacation villa. When he came back, he found Qian Yuman sitting in the living room with a haggard face and a pair of panda eyes. Kenny looked at Dongfang Xiang, who had been recovering here for the past few days, and asked him with his eyes what happened, and why things changed after he was away for a week. Dongfang Xiang also shrugged. It was a bit depressing here these days. Wang Tianyu disappeared every day, and Qian Yuman seemed to have lost his soul. He ignored her kind words and was considering moving to another place to recuperate. Little funny boy, what's wrong? Are you unhappy? Kenny sat next to Qian Yuman, took out an extra large lollipop from his bag, and handed it to Qian Yuman. Qian Yuman glanced at the lollipop in Kenny's hand with a melancholy look on her face, and rolled her eyes at him. I'm not a child. How old is she? I still give her candy. Kenny didn't care, opened the outer packaging and handed it to her mouth. If you are in a bad mood, eating some candy will make you feel better. This is backed by science. Qian Yuman sighed deeply. No candy can soothe the depression in my heart. Her world is about to collapse. How will you know if you don't try? Kenny was like coaxing a child, coaxing Qian Yuman to eat sweets. Qian Yuman was so annoyed by Kenny that she wanted to hit him, so she reluctantly took the lollipop and licked it a few times. This one tasted delicious and was the most delicious lollipop she had ever tasted. Many lollipops looked good but didn't taste good at all. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 726. Chapter 726. What happened 11 years ago? 1. Qian Yuman licked it several more times, put down the lollipop in her mouth, and looked at Kenny, who looked caring for her. Kenny, do you think there is a kind of person who you know is obviously kind and simple, but suddenly one day he changes and becomes a murderous evil person? Qian Yuman asked dully. Kenny nodded and said with a smile. There are many people like him, like him. Kenny pointed his finger at Dongfang Xiang, who was reading the newspaper and was dragged into the sea for no apparent reason. Dongfang Xiang rolled his eyes, dropped the newspaper in his hand, and glared at his friend angrily. You can't use me as an example to comfort people. Kenny sneered, shaking his head in disapproval and wagging his fingers to complain about Dongfang Xiang. Don't look at Xiang's appearance of a sunny and good boy. In fact, anyone who offends him will be whipped out with a machine gun. Among the three of us, he is the worst person to offend. But this is a good boy in front of outsiders. He looks like he is actually more sinister than anyone else. Qian Yuman opened her mouth slightly and looked at Dongfang Xiang in surprise. I heard Xiao Ling complain before and was deceived by Dongfang Xiang's appearance at the beginning. In fact, he was not a good person. Kenny took Dongfang Xiang as an example. Dongfang Xiang quit and stood up to fight. Comrade Kenny, don't use me as an example. I am such a pure and good person, so don't smear me. Don't think that I am weak now, so I can just make false accusations. Be careful that I break you. After Dongfang Xiang finished speaking, he took out the gun he carried with him and put it against Kenny's head. Qian Yuman was startled. She didn't expect that Dongfang Xiang had changed, and he turned out to be a scary big boy. As expected of a boy who grew up in the underworld, he is so brave at the age of 20. Kenny didn't care at all about Dongfang Xiang's gun against his head, and shrugged helplessly and sighed at Qian Yuman. Did you see that Xiang's face looks like a cheerful big boy that he is easy to get along with, but he is actually the one who pulled out a gun on his brother. How helpless. He's already used to it. Qian Yuman couldn't help but glance at Dongfang Xiang a few more times. Looking at his gun was quite scary. Dongfang Xiang, you should put down your gun, in case it goes off, it's too scary, these people are not human. As expected, the worst people to mess with are the gangsters, who are always ready to draw guns. Brothers Tangyuj would fight if they disagreed, but they would not draw guns. Kenny waved his hand with a look of disgust, asking Dongfang Xiang to put down the gun in his hand. In fact, everyone has a side that cannot be told to others, so why do you have to worry about it? Kenny turned into a talkative big brother at this moment, enlightening Jian Yuman. In fact, they all knew exactly what Jian Yuman was talking about. Oh, what are you struggling with, woman? Isn't it about Tang Yu's murder of Tian Yu's father? I know this very well. Clear, Jian Yuman immediately looked at Dongfang Xiang. She had asked Wang Tianyu about the details, but he refused to tell her. What's going on? Tell me quickly. Jian Yuman was eager to know, and this desire made her forget that Dongfang Xiang still had a gun in his hand, and directly grabbed his hand and shook it. This shaking scared Kenny and immediately moved his position to prevent the gun from going off. Dongfang Xiang waved his hand and put away the gun in his hand. What are you excited about? Be quiet. If you want to know, I'll tell you. Jian Yuman smiled awkwardly, took back her hand, sat down obediently, and stared at him. Tianyu and I have known each other since childhood, including your brother Tiankai. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 727. Chapter 727. What happened 11 years ago too? Jian Yuman smiled awkwardly, took back her hand, sat down obediently, and stared at him. Tianyu and I have known each other since childhood, including your brother Tiankai. I used to like chasing after Wang Tiankai and now Tangyuj the most. Jian Yuman was a little surprised. Why don't I know? Have we met when we were kids? Dongfang Xiang nodded, then shook his head. We have met before, but we don't know each other. I also saw you from a distance when I was a guest at Wang's house. Naturally, you don't have a deep impact on me at all. Jian Yuman understood that when he was a child, guests would come to the Wang family, maybe he had met them at that time. Back to business, let's get to the point. I believe you also know that Tangyuj is the adopted son of the Wang family, but neither Tianyu nor I knew about this matter before it happened 11 years ago. As for your brother Wang, we have always known it, because when he came to Wang's house, he was already 3 years old. Normally a 3-year-old child cannot remember anything, but the smart Wang Tiankai already vaguely knew that he was not a child of the Wang family. Maybe you don't know that our Dongfang family and Wang family are family friends, and even the Murong family has a relationship with us. Murong. Murong, yeah, brother and sister. Jian Yuman couldn't believe it, almost thinking she heard wrong. Dongfang Xiang nodded, confirming what she said. Dongfang, Wang, and Murong, 3 families with multiple surnames, have been family friends since childhood. At that time, the relationship between the 3 families was very harmonious, and the business they did was all the same. It was all underworld work. This also shocked Jian Yuman. Uncle Wang was actually the boss of the underworld, and he looked very kind. But this sentence came from Dongfang Xiang, and it was almost impossible to be false, because the Dongfang family was the largest underworld organization more than 10 years ago. At that time, the heads of the 3 families, Dongfang, Murong, and Wang, controlled almost all of Asia. The Dongfang family was mainly overseas, and the Wang family was mainly in Asia. Murong's father and Uncle Wang were the masters, and jointly managed the dark forces in Asia. Uncle Wang appeared to be an ordinary person doing business back then, but in fact he was anything but ordinary. Whatever he did, no matter how dark it was, he would be stained with it. However, it is rare to get involved, because on the surface the Murong family is the leader of the organization, and the Wang family is the real helmsman behind the scenes. Originally, the 3 forces were harmonious and supported each other. But 11 years ago, the home that raised Tangyuj for 11 years was destroyed by Tangyuj himself. Tangyuj teamed up with Murongya and his father to prove Uncle Wang's crimes, convicted him, and was eventually sent to prison. Uncle Wang did not expect that his best brother would actually join forces with his adopted son to harm him. In a mafia like theirs, once convicted, the final result is death, and there is no other possibility. No one knew what Tang Yu's purpose was, especially why Murong's father killed his good brother for the sake of a 14-year-old child. Dong Fangxiang's father saw his good brother being sent to prison and gave him a wake-up call. From then on, he washed his hands with Shushan Jinpan and stopped engaging in illegal activities. How is it possible? Why did Brother Wang want to harm Uncle Wang? Why did Murong's father and the others turn against Uncle Wang? Qian Yuman expressed her doubts. How could such a dramatic thing happen? End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 728. Chapter 728. What happened 11 years ago? 3. How could Brother Wang do this in the face of his Uncle Wang who raised him? What's the purpose of this? What was Tang Yu's original reason for harming Uncle Wang? What made him choose to use cruel methods to send Uncle Wang to prison with his own hands? Just like Wang Tianyu said, Tang Yu used his high IQ to indirectly kill Uncle Wang without the need for him to do it himself. Dong Fangxiang shrugged, dragging his chin in thought. My father and I also analyzed that back then, Murong's father probably wanted to be the real king of the Asian gangs, but Uncle Wang was behind him, so he had to be eradicated to realize his dominance. Eradication is not an easy task. So Murongya and the others teamed up with Wang Tiankai to do this. Qian Yuman still shook his head in confusion. Why did Brother Wang kill Uncle Wang? What's the reason? Although they are not biological father and son, they still had the kindness to raise him. It is absolutely impossible for Brother Wang to agree to the Murong family without a reason. She still couldn't believe it. The truth she heard was like a plot in a TV series, which shocked her. Don't you know that Wang Tiankai was very cruelly abused by Uncle Wang when he was a child? From the time he came to Wang's house, until Uncle Wang went to jail, he was whipped a lot. I often saw him. There are traces of being beaten with a whip, and sometimes I can't even get out of bed. It's very pitiful. Dong Fangxiang looked at Qian Yuman's unacceptable look with interest, while telling Qian Yuman the message that made Qian Yuman stupid. Because of abuse. I still can't get out of bed. Qian Yuman was completely dumbfounded. Wang's brother had been beaten by Uncle Wang when he was a child. She knew something about it. After all, many families use violent methods to educate them. Qian Yuman slowly calmed down, and she asked why a well-behaved, sensible, and smart child like Brother Wang was still beaten by Uncle Wang. It turned out that it was not just education, but pure abuse, and the abuse lasted for 11 years. Think about how hesitant Tang Yu must have been when he was only 3 years old and had to face horrific domestic violence. Uncle Wang looks kind, but is actually a gangster. It is possible that he may abuse Tang Yu. She had been with Tang Yu for so many years, and she only saw a few small scars on his body. She always thought it was just a small punishment, but she didn't expect that it was a whip, or even bloody. It was not just education, it had reached the level of domestic violence. Wang Tiankai liked to wear long sleeves when he was a child, and even wore long sleeves in summer. Now I think he was always covering his wounds to prevent her from seeing and feeling distressed. No wonder Brother Wang's face looks a little pale sometimes. It turns out that there are serious wounds on his body, which may never stop. When I was a child, he would even disappear for a period of time. When asked where he was going, he would not answer, fearing that the wound could not be covered or he was very weak. She had seen injuries on Brother Wang's body several times before. When she asked about the situation, he only said it was a minor injury and said it in a nonchalant manner. But now it seems that the situation is very serious and has reached the level of abnormality. Otherwise, how could Tang Yu be forced to break out and join forces with Murong's father to send Uncle Wang to prison to completely get rid of the fear of domestic violence? It turns out that Brother Wang has been abused since he was a child and never stopped. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 729. Chapter 729 Nightmare 1. Uncle Wang abused him. Would he take revenge only when he couldn't bear it anymore? He would definitely resist, but he didn't expect that his resistance would directly send Uncle Wang to prison. Had Dongfang Xiang told her, she would never have thought that his revenge methods were so vicious. Perhaps there were things she didn't know about back then, or maybe Uncle Wang's abuse was more horrific than she thought, which made Tang Yuge unbearable. She can also understand a little bit of Wang Tianyu's feelings. The eldest brother he once respected and admired the most personally sent his biological father to prison. After Tang Yuge sent Uncle Wang to prison, he disappeared from Wang Tianyu and returned to the Tang family. He went from a happy family to a lonely person overnight. It was definitely a huge blow to him, and it turned him into a person with a dark side in his heart. After knowing that the Murong family was once a gangster, Qian Yuman finally understood why there were often rumors that the Emgrand group had some dirty things. Senior Su said that Tang Yuge was doing illegal things. It must be because of the Murong family in the past. Background causes. Just like now, she doesn't believe that what the Dongfang family has done can completely break away from the dark things in the past. At this moment, Qian Yuman missed Tang Yuge very much, especially knowing the pain in his heart. The cruel experience of being abused since childhood made her feel sorry for him. She really wanted to go back to him, but she would never mention the past with him again, because every time she mentioned it, she was reminding him of the abuse he suffered back then, and the fact that he later desperately wanted to send Uncle Wang to prison. She missed Tang Yuge so much and wanted to leave here. Qian Yuman's eyes were fixed on Kenny and Dongfang Xiang. The only ones who could save her now were the two handsome guys in front of her. As city Tang Yuge's residence. Tang Yuge opened his eyes dimly, and a pillow suddenly hit his face. He jumped up from the bed, and an angry face appeared in front of him. Tang Yuge, you are very good. You only know how to sleep and don't know how to come to me. Do you really want to divorce me? If I had known that it would be so painful if I followed you, I shouldn't have married you in the first place. Qian Yuman's face was filled with smiles. Angry, another pillow appeared in his hand and slammed it in front of Tang Yuge. Tang Yuge stood up immediately, rushed over, and hugged Qian Yuman, ecstatic. Honey, you are finally back. I miss you so much. I'm here to get the divorce agreement. I signed the divorce agreement happily. Don't torture each other anymore. A divorce agreement appeared in Qian Yuman's hand, handed it to him, and stuffed it in his hand. A pen. No, I don't want to divorce you. Tang Yuge shook his head, determined not to divorce. Ah ha ha ha. You murderer, it was you who let our child die. Do you think I will still be with you? If you don't sign, I will commit suicide again. Sign it quickly. Yi Man's face was ferocious, in great pain, and she looked like she would collapse at any time. Tang Yuge shook his head vigorously. Seeing Qian Yuman's painful look, it made him feel better. It was not easy for him to see her again. Don't sign? Then you go to hell. A knife suddenly appeared in Qian Yuman's hand and stabbed him hard in the stomach. Tang Yuge looked at Qian Yuman in disbelief. She actually wanted to kill him. Did she hate herself so much? He looked down at his bleeding belly, but there was no pain at all. His eyes gradually became distracted. Your Majesty is in a bad mood today, so this is just one chapter. I will make up for it tomorrow. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 730. Chapter 730 Nightmare 2. Tang Yuge, who was lying on the bed, suddenly sat up from the bed, opened his confused eyes, and looked around at the familiar environment. "Were you dreaming just now?" Thinking of the scene in the dream, the way Tianyuman accused him, he was deeply afraid of her. Nightmares always accompanied him late at night, sneaking into his dreams while he was sleeping. Fortunately, everything is a dream, not a real occurrence. My heart was beating fast, and I had not yet recovered from the pain. I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead, stood up in a daze, and then fell back to my original position. A night's hangover left him unclear. "Wake up!" A delicate voice appeared in the room, followed closely by Tianyuman, who was wearing home clothes and a bib in front of her body. Tanyuj blinked, feeling a little dazed, his eyes widened, looking at the person in front of him in disbelief. Her Tianyuman was wearing a bib and was holding a tray in her arms. On the tray was a delicate small bowl with white hot steam and a fragrant aroma wafting from the bowl. She walked slowly to the bedside, placed the tray in her hand on the bedside table, stretched out her hand and gently covered his forehead. "I haven't sobered up yet, and you look stupid." Tianyuman smiled brightly, her smile was as beautiful as a flower, so beautiful that his heart trembled. He watched her stretch out her soft little hand and gently poke his chest. He stretched out his hand to cover Tianyuman's hand hard, wrapped her hand in his big palm with both hands, gently rubbed her hand, put her hand on his heart, and closed his eyes happily. "What are you doing? Get up and drink the hangover soup." Tianyuman took away her hand with a smile, but he held it firmly while he said it. Tanyuj shook his head, slowly opened his evil eyes, and stared at the lost and found little man in front of him. "Honey, when did you come back? I'm so glad you're okay. I miss you so much." The little man in front of him burst out laughing, his eyes as cute and charming as crescent moons. Tianyuman tried to take out her hand but failed, and said with a helpless smile, "What are you talking about? Are you still awake? I've been back for several days, have you forgotten?" "Huh?" Tanyuj looked at Tianyuman in front of him in surprise. Tianyuman finally took her hand back from his and buried her whole body into his chest. "I will never leave you again. I'm sorry for making you worry in the past." Tanyuj's worried face finally showed a happy smile. He opened his arms and hugged the little man tightly in his arms. "Look at me, I'm really confused." "Tianur, welcome home." "Yes. It's been several days since Tianur came back, and he still hasn't recovered yet. Every time he wakes up, he calls out her name anxiously, for fear that she will run away from him or disappear. Fortunately, God sent her back to him." Under Tianyuman's watchful eyes, Tanyuj drank the hangover soup and followed her everywhere. Watch her make breakfast, watch her wash and dry clothes, watch her watch TV. From time to time, the two people's eyes would meet, and they would feel sweet in their hearts. "It's great to have her. I wish I could just look at her like this for the rest of my life." Tianyuman changed out of her home clothes and took Tanyuj out. Tanyuj looked at her doubtfully. "Honey, where are we going?" "You'll find out when you come with me." End of this chapter.